Yes, flag green behind us.
Right, yeah.
Boy,
There
no, it's-
might be some.
if anyone's watching the meeting.
Thanks, Susie.
Are you ready to go? Sure.
I am. One of all our trustees seated though.
Yeah.
No, not at all. Fine. But we will call to order the Tuesday, May 2nd Committee of the Whole meeting. Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Babcock,
Yes.
Malaco,
Here.
Petty,
Here.
Flock,
Here.
Simon,
Here.
Wright.
Here.
Gustafson.
There's not generally a administrator's report, but I'm gonna create one at the start of this one. I just want to echo Chief Howley's welcoming of our new elected officials that he did at the start of the meeting there. I want to welcome trustees Babcock, Sima, and Wright to the board, and I want to thank outgoing officials Zula, Keene, and Dunn. It is not easy standing in the ring, so to speak. Putting yourself out there to represent a municipality or to be the one taking the stand to make decisions. I think now more than ever, it seems our elected officials are convenient targets for criticism, often with little regard to one another. To those that have served, to those that are starting to serve, I thank you. You deserve our respect and our gratitude. It won't always be easy. In the end, though, I hope that you find it rewarding, and thank you and congratulations. We'll move on to approval of minutes. 3.1, is there a motion to approve the minutes from the April 18th, 2023 Committee of the Whole meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by trustee Malaco, second by trustee Petty. Any discussion? Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Babcock,
Yes.
Malaco,
Yes.
Petty,
Yes.
Flock,
Yes.
Simon,
Yes.
Wright.
Yes. Motion approved 6-0. Public comment. Anyone wish to speak? Part of public comment? No, Mr. Baxter wrote first. Go ahead, please. I guess
Rob Baxter.
state your name. Yeah, I don't know.
I just wanted to say congratulations to everybody for a very decisive and very appealing campaign that you ran. And we're happy to see you on the board tonight and working so well together. Really very professional gathering here tonight. And I'm glad to see that. I did want to follow up with one question. Plat 6, can you answer this at this point? But does that involve the entire area there or no? How much of it is it then?
We'll have Attorney Curlincus repeat what he said.
Okay, I didn't quite catch that.
Are you looking for the locations? This only involves plat 6, but I think if you're looking for the actual boundaries. Is that the question where the boundaries are?
Yeah, in essence.
How about it? Up on the wall, otherwise.
I'll bring it up a little bit.
If you don't mind.
There were two, I'll quickly answer. There were two plats, plat 5 and plat 6. Plat 5 is the easternmost portion of the property in question. It involves the extension of Hawks Point Drive to Roscoe Road and the expansion and turn lane construction at Roscoe Road. It involves the development of units on either side of Hawks Point, the extension of Hawks Point Drive. If memory serves, it's 7 separate buildings. That's close. I'm within one either way.
Fair to say plat 6 is the majority of the development.
That's correct.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Mr. Dunn?
Like Don and I also would like to congratulate the board, the new board, the old members. And my only request is that you research before you vote and vote your conscience. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Moving to new business. Item 5. Oh, I'm sorry. Anyone else? I don't want to close it prematurely. Anyone else want to? Anything? And we will move into new business. Item 5.1. Discussion or recommendation to the board to authorize entering into an agreement with Landscape Material and Firewood Sales, Inc. for tub grinding vegetative storm debris collected at Riverside Park for the quoted price of $12,050. After the severe storms that hit us early April, we made a post and opened up both Riverside, the parking lot at Riverside Park, residents to come dump their debris. We also, the Public Works Department drove around and collected debris that people brought out to the edge of the street, deposited there as well. It was overwhelmingly utilized. The entire parking lot is completely filled with debris. And it is beyond, well, it's beyond our capacity to process, and probably now beyond our man-hour ability to process. While we did ask that people didn't drop off full logs, they did, and that's okay, we'll deal with them now, but there are large full tree trunks and full logs there. It's beyond the capacity that even our normal tree vendors work with. We have a annual contract right now with Tree Care Enterprises to do tree removal and chipping for us, but it's bigger than they can handle. The sub that they often use is the one referenced here. They have something called a tub grinder. A tub grinder is a massive piece of equipment that has a huge circular hopper. It actually utilizes a boom crane that lifts material and drops into this huge tub grinder. It does, though, a better job. It grinds it more finely than our chipper normally would. And if we want to, we can even introduce dye. And in the end, we can have a product like the dyed mulch you would perhaps buy at a nursery, right? This is a unique task not performed by, this is not a piece of equipment many people have. So this was the vendor we found was able to do that.
Troy, is there anything you would like to add?
The only thing I had was this, that actually our contractor that cuts our trees, he recommended this group, this is who does, their big lot. Usually comes in once or twice a year and chips off their trees.
Scott mentioned we could dye the chips. Would these chips be suitable for use in our playgrounds if they were not dyed?
Not in our playgrounds, those are safety certified, use the trees and everything, they've gone through to make sure there's no nails in the trees or any.
Motion to send to the board.
Second.
Motion by trustee Malaco, second by trustee Petty. Is there any further questions or discussion?
What would you do with it? If you, what would you use it if you dyed it?
We'll utilize it in landscape areas throughout the village. If we would have had it, we would have just used it around the front of the building. We could do it. We have landscape areas around Porter Park. We have a number of boulevard islands, which is where we can use it. And truthfully, some of the material like this, we could stockpile and use it for years to come potentially. It only gets better with age as it decomposes.
Oh, yeah, it's like wine,
I guess. So.
Or invite people to take some free?
I was wondering if there would be a liability with that.
Is the dye gonna be an extra cost?
Yes,
Oh,
it said the dye is an extra cost, and if you, all depends how much they can even run it through the pub grinder again to make it even more credible, fine.
forgive me. I didn't realize that was an extra cost to what's proposed. So right now, what's proposed does not include
Yeah,
that.
that's natural.
So do we need to add that in? If
Can
we're
you
trying
use
to
it
use
now?
it for landscaping?
We can use it, I mean, all depends what the board recommends. Personally, I can use that naturally around our parks at Riverside, Porter, things like
And
that.
we would pay for that, right? If we had to go buy.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, what if we kept some natural and then had some dyed? Should we lay this over and get quotes on it? I mean, it's only 2 weeks.
Do you know the price for dyed? Or home to dye it?
Honestly, I don't even know if this machine that he brings here will do the dye he talked about. When they go to tree care, when he does a huge amount. I'm not sure if it's the same machine or not, but he talked about they dye for tree care.
We're at committee right now, so you can certainly. You guys just, the board decides you want to have it dyed, or that's an option, then. Make that your motion and then try to get that quote. And the board level, you can approve that.
But what color dye?
Yeah, yeah. It's gonna be a
Brown is the only option we will allow.
No orange.
No, ma'am.
Well, if they can run it a second time and do the dye, let's get it ground up so it's at least usable now. We can get it out of our parking lot. And then we can always run another batch, like Sue said, and dye it. That would be my recommendation.
Okay,
So we do have a motion in a second. What I will add is that we'll get additional, between now and the board, we'll find out what the cost might be. Clerk, will you call the roll?
Block,
Yes.
Malaco.
Yes.
Babcock,
Yes.
Wright,
Yes.
Simon,
Yes.
Petty.
Yes,
Thank you.
Approved 6-0. Thank you. Item 5.2 is discussion and a recommendation to the board to authorize entering into an agreement with the aforementioned Tree Care Enterprises for removal of dead and hazardous trees and undergrowth along the shoreline near the boat launch at Riverside Park. This is for a quoted amount of $11,850. This was part of a identified and budgeted project. Troy Public Works Department wants to both do a new boat launch, a new dock system this year, and also remove the dead vegetation that has reached the point of being dangerous, of trees falling over in the area of the boat launch, and then also to do some form of shoreline stabilization with large rock placement. This is sort of step one of that. We do approve. We have an annual contract with Tree Care Enterprises. Combined, Troy, is it $50,000 a year? $30,000 a year. $30,000 a year for tree removal, because we normally chip away at that, no pun intended, a little bit at a time. And those smaller amounts don't necessarily need board approval. $11,000 at one time does. The bigger question down the line is, we had budgeted a fair amount of money for the shoreline improvements at Riverside Park. Whether this, in the end, whether this $11,850, whether we credit that towards the shoreline improvements at Riverside Park or the $30,000 tree removal. And if I might suggest, we could make that decision down the road a little bit. We could see how much other removal we need and find the right place to allocate this expenditure. But the sheer dollar amount requires board approval.
So moved.
One real quick question, maybe like a curiosity. Do we need Illinois Department of Conservation permission?
IDNR.
We do not. All of this work is covered under the IDNR permit called statewide 9. It's a self-permitting process that we comply with.
Okay. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion or questions? Clerk, will you call the roll?
Babcock,
Yes.
Petty,
Yes,
Block,
Yes.
Simon,
Yes.
Wright,
Yes.
Malaco.
Yes.
0, thank you. Discussion and recommendation of the board to authorize entering into an agreement with Total Plumbing Inc. for installation of HVAC upgrades at Swanson Park concession building. Incorrectly listed as Porter Park in the agenda by yours truly. With a quote price of $15,978. This is a pair of furnaces and a new air conditioning unit. These are identified, these are the systems that are failing. These are identified at budget time. We budgeted $20,000. The quote we have quotes from 2 different companies. And the quote that recommends moving forward is the Total Plumbing for $15,978.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by trustee Block, second by trustee Malaco. Are there any questions or comments? Hearing none, clerk, would you please call the roll?
Simon,
Yes.
Babcock,
Yes.
Petty,
yes,
Wright,
Yes.
Malaco,
Yes.
Block.
Yes. Thank you. Motion passes 6-0. Item 5.4, discussion and recommendation to the board regarding amendments to resolution 2021-R47, reassigning Chevy Silverado 1500 for general village uses. When we take our vehicles through a master lease agreement with Enterprise, whenever we do one, we part of the resolution, we assign their usage. This had previously been assigned to the village administrator and now will be reassigned just for general village usage.
I'd like to make a motion to recommend to the board reassigning the 2022 Chevy Silverado 1500 for general village use and HR for devising a sign in and sign out procedure and a record keeping procedure.
So moved.
That was a motion, so it's a second.
Second.
Oh, stop texting me on it.
Yes,
Yes.
I will.
Thank you. Motion and a second, any discussion?
Are you no longer needing this vehicle? Or-
It will be available for use within the village for village
What's the
objects.
reason for taking it away from the administrator?
Additional use by other departments.
Okay, if there's that much of a need, we don't pay for these vehicles. We actually make money off of buying them. So why don't we look into getting another one instead of taking it away from one of our most valued assets?
You can explore that.
I don't think we're taking it away from him. We're actually opening it up to everyone to use. He can use it whatever he wants.
Everybody has that ability right now, though, already when he's here.
Okay, then why is that?
Why is it?
Okay.
Is it in the employment agreement? This employment? package or-
No, it's not.
It is not.
Okay. It seems like to me that it's still available to him anytime he wants to use it. So
Right, but he leaves for meetings like straight from home some days and stuff, so.
Check-
for him
then
to-
maybe it
for
should
him
be
to have to
addressed in the
come all the way
employment
here.
agreement. Who creates the employment agreement?
We do.
Maybe that should be reflected in the employment agreement.
But Justin, there's an ability to check it out the night before we meet. I mean, that would still be.
Yeah, I don't think
okay.
anybody's gonna get upset with that. I
As long as he has access to it.
mean, I think we all value what Scott does. But it should have been addressed in an employment agreement whenever that was, it was long before my time. And if it needs to be adjusted and put in an employment agreement, and everybody votes on it, well, then that'd be the way to. I respect that he needs the vehicle, but I don't know, because I'm new to this, of how much. But it seems like it's making it available to him whenever he needs it. And to anybody else. Well, who else needs the vehicle? If they need it, Scott will need it whenever he has need for it. But I think back to my point is, in a regular business, you would have figured this would be part of your employment agreement. So that's where it should have been handled, and if that's where it needs to be, then it should be.
Well, and that's where we did roll it into this agreement. That was part of his usage. So while it didn't technically go into his agreement, by doing it as a resolution, it was rolled into his package as it was. So it was done that way. It just wasn't in his actual agreement because we don't go back and redo his agreement like that.
Clerk call the roll.
Wright,
Yes.
Eddie,
Yes.
Malaco,
No,
Babcock,
Yes.
Lima,
Yes.
Lot.
No,
I think that was 4-2. Discussion and recommendation of the board regarding amendments to the criteria for determining what constitutes a responsible bidder for public works projects, the village of Roscoe, Illinois. We sent a memo out on this. This is specifically removing two components of we generally just abbreviate this as our RBO. And you'll find most communities just refer to it as RBO, and everyone has one. So as you see, the actual name of the ordinance is a mouthful, but RBO stands for Responsible Bidders Ordinance. So two components have been added. One was the board had the right to require that a contractor or a vendor bidding on a project to enter into a PLA, a project labor agreement. Those, I believe, are overseen by the Northwest Illinois Building Trades Committee. It's not an agreement with the village of Roscoe, and essentially is an agreement between trades on a project. And then the other element that was added and is now being proposed for removal is something called a local preference credit. And that is when a contractor bidding on a project, if they're established as a business entity within Winnebago County, they can elect to, there's a document they would fill out and submit with their form, where they would participate in a program that would allow the village to adjust their bid downward up to 5% for the reason of making the local contractor the low bid and thus getting the project. Those are being proposed for removal.
Can I ask a question? So how often are these used? How often are these been used by local or resources? Has it been extensively used? Let's say take the second one, 5%.
I don't know, so I
I
guess,
think our engineer can answer that. He was raising his hand. Brandon?
So it has not been elected to be approved by the board at this point on any of the projects. We usually include it in any of the capital improvement projects. So the residential streets program, the Class D patching programs. Pretty much every year contractors fill it, at least one contractor fills it out and opts to elect for that program. But I do not believe that that has come into play because the local bidder who elected for that, their bid was higher than 5% or 5% greater, I'm sorry, greater than 5% than the next lowest bid. So it would not have been applicable to the projects that they submitted for.
So there's never been a successful local bid with it that we know of.
I don't know if that too, now the way this works is that every time we lay out a bid, you'll actually choose, and currently you will choose as the board if you're gonna have this as part of your bid package, as well as the second item that project labor agreement. I don't think the board's ever issued a bid specification with the project labor agreement, ever. I've never selected that as even an option or requirements. And then generally we have had it on almost all of our recent bids, this local bidder preference, as Brandon said, it's never come into play because it's never bidding within that 5%. One other thing to note too on the local bidder ordinance, how we have this is that this actually will lower down the bids to match that lower bid. So it's not giving a credit, like, so I think some municipalities have it where it's a credit where it says, okay, if you're here, the local bidders here, if you're within that, then you're gonna pay that higher amount, but you're paying with a local bidder. Ours is actually opposite of that. Ours actually brings it down to match the non-local bidder. So it will never be higher than what you would be paying if you didn't have it, which could be an option if it in other municipalities.
Does the non-local bidder know that this 5% is
Yes.
out there?
Yeah, and this will be in all the bid package, and you can look and see it's actually in the residential road one, just because it's sort of the form we had, it'll be removed before it gets out.
Why was it in there? If it's now we're voting it to take it out, I think.
Just because it hasn't been approved yet, right? So what you approved tonight was without it in there. So when they actually issue it to the bidders, they'll actually remove that from the packet.
So the
Yes.
intent or the idea was that it would allow local companies to keep local funds in the village, right? So if a local bidder bid was within that 5%, that would allow them to come down to that price and then keep that money in the community as well. So not only is it being paid by us, but it comes back into us because it's a local.
And they establish local by, how they establish it's a local, it could be part of the bidder
Winnebago
consortium.
County,
Yeah.
So,
Essentially, Winnebago County.
because we're a part of Winnebago County, we chose Winnebago County at the time of creating.
so anyone in Winnebago.
Paying sales tax to Winnebago
Correct.
County. One can agree with the general principle of it, but how do you measure local dollars returned? And then secondly, what does this do to competition? Are people dissuaded from competing? And then third, the attorney mentioned that this has just been recent. We had always followed state practices regarding how we bid. These two pieces of language were just instituted recently. So we've heard that they're little used. And we don't have a specific answer or measure to, does it encourage or discourage bidding? And really, is there a measurement of the local dollars returned? How do we measure that? We hear it all the time anecdotally, but where's the measurement of it?
I'm sure it doesn't hurt to have it in there. Just because local dollars are obviously going to come back locally. And then as far as deterring bidders, I believe all of our paving projects last year were a company out of Wisconsin, won them.
He maintains a quarry in Winnebago County to make them qualified, I guess.
No. Not that I'm aware of anyway.
Does the board have deference to award agreement to a local contractor if it's within a certain amount of money? So in essence, if the building and public works decide that this is within a certain nation that we could award business to a local business as opposed to one that maybe, nope. So you
No,
don't have to-
when we do, when we're doing our bids, it's a bid, it's low, it's specifications, we decide, we make the specifications, you approve those specs. Everybody bids to the same standards and we have to go with that low amount.
Any other questions or discussion?
Do we know what percentage of these projects are local? Like, what, do we have any idea of how many percentage of, like, what's going through here is what we deem local currently?
By local, you mean the,
Within
Vendors that are
Winnebago, how we
bidding on it?
define it as Winnebago County?
so we define it by Winnebago County, and they have to have evidence of a certain level of sales tax reporting within Winnebago County, so they have to have transacted business in Winnebago County. That doesn't mean they might have headquarters elsewhere, but that they have to have a viable, real presence in Winnebago County. To my understanding, on road projects, we largely have a relatively local pool of interest. It's when we see building projects, I think that really draws the attention of a broader market and brings people in from Chicago and beyond.
I'm not mistaken, what I heard though, is that the local who could have had an advantage from that 5% came in at a higher price.
Right.
Than the low bidder, and even the 5% wouldn't get them to the low bid.
That's correct. And also a local bidder doesn't have to participate. They could say my number stands. And I'm not going to.
Maybe this is not a good question, but what is the total dollar amount that we spend a year on these kind of bids? I mean, is this, we're talking millions or
Couple million.
couple million?
Locally, I can tell you that I think this sort of hit the consciousness throughout the county, probably 10 years ago on a very large project in Rockford down at the airport, the Global Trade Park, when a local contractor missed out on a $2 or $3 million project by $1,200. And it went to someone out of state and couldn't be known at the time, but ultimately it did go kind of, there was issues with the vendor. But even before they knew that, I know the city tried to see if there was anything they could do at such a tight margin to award that project to a local contractor, and they weren't able to. So they have since adopted the same type of local bidder preference that would give them the tool. Trustee Simon sort of said, do we have that within our authority? Is there a margin where we can make an adjustment to try to give a job to a local? There's not. It would only be through the lowering of their bid to make them the low.
If they happen to come within the 5%.
Correct.
And they applied for it,
to participate.
But again, we're saying that's not, it's been rarely.
We're saying that it's not actually in practice ever been
Used here.
used or.
It has not resulted in someone getting a job that they would not have
Correct.
otherwise gotten.
It's been used, just hasn't, it's never been blowing out.
Implemented.
Well, successfully
Worded based on it.
Okay.
So it seemed to have no effect then if we took it out.
In practice, that is probably correct.
Unless the
Looking backwards, it would
contract
have no
comes
effect.
within 5%.
Yeah.
But just because over the last few years, we haven't hit that threshold, doesn't mean we wouldn't hit it tomorrow. So by taking it out, you're saying it's gone, never applies again. As far as,
I think
Interest?
you make a good point, Stacy. I just have a difficult time, like, well, what if? Well, what if a lot of times never happen? And if it does on a regular basis, then we should revisit and reconsider it and say, oh, we should have done it.
but it doesn't hurt us to take it out or leave it in.
It only hurts us,
To remove
hurts to
it. It really hurts
remove it.
the local bidder if we remove it. They no longer
It
have
hasn't
that
so-
option.
But it hasn't so far. So
But it hasn't helped. Or
do we have any Scott project coming up that we perceive that would be the case? You said we already work with a certain street. Maintenance.
I don't, if I look at the projects put out the bid this year, I don't imagine that it will be a very.
Okay.
I also think from a contractor, you're looking at maybe potentially inflating your bid if you're local,
Exactly.
if you have to come down to the 5%, which would potentially hurt you. So, you're playing that numbers game.
Well, you know, it's within 5%, so you're not gonna inflate it too much, because then you know, like it's already happened, that you're gonna be past that threshold, so I think you still
Or you just don't
bid it.
participate.
What about the bidder that wasn't not gonna bid because he said, you know what, I don't like to play in this unreasonable game, where there's an advantage to something.
We never have that great big pool of bidders anyways, and all the years that I've been here, there's only a select few people that bid for things anyways. And those are usually the people that keep bidding. So this would be the new guy, maybe locally, that would be able to pull itself in there and get that 5%. It does not hurt the village to leave it in there. So I don't understand the big push to get rid of something that does not hurt us. If it's in there and they use it and it works in our benefit. If no one ever uses it, then there's no harm, no foul. So you want to remove the other thing, that's fine. Removing this doesn't make sense.
What's the second component, the other thing?
Project labor agreement, which
All right, so explain that.
that's for local trades, like Illinois has a law anyway for, like if somebody comes in and they're paying their people below it's prevailing wage. So if they're paying them below prevailing wage, they have to pay prevailing wage. That's state law. It's enforced. in state law.
Now, can I-
Yeah, a project labor
I don't want
agreement.
to miss commission for this meeting.
I'm sorry. I can address really quickly. The project labor agreement, essentially, all the unions have their own little areas of expertise. This makes them go into an agreement so they don't fight with each other. That's essentially what it is. I mean,
It's a union.
it's a union thing. Yep.
A PLA, again, it's not an agreement with the village. It's an agreement between trades on a job where they sort of establish their rules of engagement between each other. Who's doing what, who's being classified with what tasks, with what responsibilities. To me, it's somewhat inconsequential to us. I can tell you when we built the police department building, in hindsight, there was times I think we would have benefited from it because we had friction amongst our subcontractors that resulted sometimes in delays to the project. Ultimately, thankfully not delays in quality, but certainly in delays in the time frame that perhaps theoretically could have been avoided with the PLA, but I can't speak intelligently to it.
Yeah, I missed some, but is this just union relationships?
Correct.
What if you have a non-union? It
They're
doesn't.
not required to participate for our ordinance.
Section F essentially is not going to be upheld by the village.
Pardon?
Correct. It wouldn't be upheld by the village. So, yes, it doesn't really need to be in there. But the local preference is something that I feel should stay and does not hurt the village by staying.
And the low preference, Justin, is the first one you're
5%.
talking about.
Correct.
Is anyone interested in making a motion of some kind?
I'll make a motion that we leave section D and forego section F,
Eliminate section F.
eliminate
Section F is the
project labor.
project.
So do you have comments on this?
No, I don't.
Thank you.
The motion, is there a second?
Second,
Very last minute there.
I
So
like drawing it out.
the motion is to amend our responsible bidders ordinance to eliminate section F that pertains to the project labor agreement, but to leave section D, which refers to the local preference credits. What do you call the roll?
Malaco,
Yes,
Simo,
No,
Wright,
No.
Babcock,
No,
Teddy,
No,
Block.
Yes,
Motion fails 4-2. Two to four. Is there any old business? Otherwise, it's going to take us right into a discussion as to what happens next after the vote with that. Any old business? Then one thing, President Gustafson, Stephen Bill, has asked us to do is start making a series of presentations at the committee of the whole meetings. to pick a topic and just make a brief presentation and allow the opportunity for questions or discussion. And the first one that she recommended was a look at the ordinance that governs the creation, the purpose, the membership, and the rules of the committee of the whole. You have a copy of that ordinance. It is most recently ordinance 2020-23. That's the last time the ordinance was amended. Once.
Oh, wait a
Are we
minute.
okay, guys?
Sorry, I'm just consulting with the President. I'll be quiet. Sure.
No. He needs to talk.
It was a clarification.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, once upon a time, the village had a series of different committees, right? And each committee maybe had, it predates me, but 3 members per committee, perhaps.
3 members committee, each one had a chair.
Resulted in a lot of meetings and a lot of stuff going on and
Every
Yes.
night, every week.
every night of every week.
It absolutely was.
Yeah. So at some point, as many smaller municipalities do, we combined all of those individual committees. And you might have had a parks committee,
Public safety,
Public safety
boards,
committee.
buildings and grounds.
personnel committee, building and grounds committees. We combine them to committee of the whole. The committee of the whole meeting always immediately follows the village board meeting. And it's where ideas are brought forward for initial discussion, right? As we're having tonight, it's where the pros and cons of any item that's brought forward are debated. Then a recommendation is made to move that on to the board. And again, we try to make our motions in the affirmative. So we usually have a recommendation to the board to approve something. Now that recommendation to approve might not pass. I think we've seen that tonight. If it doesn't pass, then it moves forward to the board with essentially no recommendation, and it goes into new business. It does not go immediately into motions and resolutions. If an item passes at committee of the whole, it then essentially becomes the first reading, and it goes right into what's called motions and resolutions at the board, and final action can be taken at the board meeting 2 weeks after that committee of the whole meeting. When it's not, when there's not a favorable recommendation, then it goes under new business, where essentially it gets another reading, or if the board decided to, they could elect to waive the rules or suspend the rules and still take final action on it. But generally speaking, when things go into new business, that's meant to be essentially another reading, another recommendation forward to the subsequent board meeting. This last amendment to the ordinance brought in a new wrinkle where if something receives 5 negative votes, 5 no votes, if a motion to approve has 5 no votes, 5 out of 6, because the president does not vote in committee of the whole, then it essentially does not move forward. And that was a new rule put in 2020. We never used to have the concept of something dying in committee. Everything moved forward one way or the other. But the latest modification here was with 5 negative votes. It just simply died and did not move forward. Now, I always find it somewhat interesting, and we should talk about the construction of the committee of the whole. The committee of the whole consists of the 6 members, the 6 trustees. They're full voting members. The president is considered ex officio. They can serve as in an advisory capacity, but it's certainly in a non-voting role. What's interesting is section D, selection of chairperson. Ordinance says that the chair of the committee of the whole shall be selected after nomination made by a member of the committee and approval of a majority vote of all committee members, if the chair's term shall run a maximum of 2 years. However, irrespective of the chair's tenure of service, a new chairman shall be selected as soon as practicable after seating of those trustees elected to office in each biennial municipal election. I inherited the chair from my predecessor, Pat DeGrave. I don't think we have ever voted to actually nominate a chair to the committee of the whole. I just, correct me if I'm wrong, Joe, but I just think we have
I think we have,
flowed
but
forward
not
with the
for a long
village
time.
administrator being the chair. Yes. Please know I have no objection whatsoever to following protocol here and having.
Aren't you required to vote on 2 years or no? It just can just vote.
Oh, I think it ends in 2 years, then it's next person can, you would essentially choose somebody every 2 years. when you have your re-elections like this, but until then.
I just don't know the last time. I don't even know how my predecessor was initially assigned. To
I
be
think
the
there
chairman
there
of the
was a
committee
vote
of
on
the whole.
that.
Yeah,
There was a vote, but he's just down until then, just been.
so I suspect it was
continuously-
almost 9 years ago, perhaps, that there was actually a motion and a vote on a chair. So,
I will add, at one time, members of the committee assumed the chair on a rotating basis, and that proved to be unwieldy.
Yeah.
That was great. And then once we got a village administrator, it was just easier. Always that.
obviously, with the administrator, the chair is not a voting member. I don't know if
It
that's,
seemed like though, for anyone, it'd be an awful burden to take on as a trustee to chair what all the stuff you're presenting. We wouldn't have any, certainly wouldn't have any background for it.
But I wasn't aware of it, so it's good to know.
right, right. I'll ask our village attorney if there's, thinks there's any other salient points that should be addressed here in the ordinance governing.
I think you hit the big ones that eventually we do sort of a first read, second read. If something comes from committee, and so that's the first read essentially, moves to the board as second read. If it's coming directly to the board, you'll see this happen, we'll either waive that requirement for the 2 reads, or it'll be read into the record, maybe some discussion, and then it'll be on the next board agenda for a vote. So generally, things are on they're at 2 meetings, either 2 board meetings or a committee and a board meeting. I think that's the big one. I think that's come up before.
Is there some action that we're gonna have to take here, or is it, can we?
If we want to conform with
If
the
you want-
ordinance, I guess at some point you could nominate a chair and vote on it.
But I mean, tonight, or is this something we can?
I think it would need to be an agenda item.
We can just move
I
it
think it's
forward.
just your internal. I mean, honestly, if you wanted to do it tonight, you could, or.
I suppose you could.
mean,
Also, I
it's
can
be
tell
your
you,
internal operation, but this is your board.
one other thing I want to point out is that, because it comes up from time to time. Nothing that happens at committee of the whole is a final action, right? There's no resolutions or ordinances passed at committee of the whole. It's just simply a recommendation forward to the board. Now, the board cannot act on something that hasn't been properly noticed, that hasn't been advertised in an agenda, in a published agenda. Can't sneak something into a board meeting. It's not necessarily the case in the committee of the whole meeting. We have brought things to the committee of the whole that night that weren't on the agenda. And that's okay, because you're not taking final action. You're still just making a recommendation on it. So I guess to Joe's point, it could be done.
Like honoring.
Correct, exactly right. 2 weeks ago, I brought up the special event permit for the Live Real Foundation in Leland Park. It wasn't on the agenda, but we received it and realized, oh, this utilizes village property, which necessitates board approval. And we brought it up to committee so that it could be approved in a timely fashion.
I am happy the way that it is running with Scott chairing committee.
Nomination?
The
Is
purpose.
it a nomination then? I'll second it.
No. The purpose of my intent here was just to acquaint all of you with the process and give you an opportunity to examine the language and do what you have done, asking questions. So if you want to study it, reflect on it, or do whatever, it's your committee. But just if you have a general understanding of how it works, that's great. If you have any other questions about it, if you want to review the document that was put in your box, your docs, go ahead and do that. So no action is required this evening.
I'd like to make a comment. I think this is a great forum, not just only for us, but for everyone that's there.
Yeah.
I've sat in that seat as an attendee, a constituent, listening to it. I did not know what the difference was between the committee of the whole and the village board. I've been corrected a couple times on not speaking, speaking for when it was not covenant of whole or committee of the whole business, and it was village business. My goal is to make this board approachable and to really emphasize communication and having our village know what's going on, understand these terms, right? So I think that I appreciate you, Mr. Sanders, going ahead and telling us about this. And I think it's something that we should continue to do, at least for the near future, if people are interested in it, because it's not just for me. I think it's for everyone to get people involved. So thank you.
And
Thanks, Mike.
I would add to that comment too. I mean, you know, Scott, you're a very good communicator. A lot of, looks like you have a lot of stuff that you communicate on where topics that, you know, obviously we're new to. With Stacy and Justin, obviously they have a lot more history here, but I would second that. What we have seen tonight is something. In all the meetings that I attended before, we never saw any communication. We never knew what was going on. It was just like yes and no. I think this is a healthy thing for us and for everybody on the committee because we need to make good decisions for the constituents that voted for us. And I think that the way we do that is having open discussions like this. I think in my position here, I don't have enough knowledge even to know which way to go on this at this point. So if there was a way for us to move it forward, or if that's an option, that would be what I would suggest we do. The other thing is about the committees. You know, I could see, well, maybe there's some advantage of committees in the context that I understand committees, but in the context of here, if it just slows things down, and I certainly don't want to be meeting every single night on some topic. So I think I don't have enough information to make a good decision, honestly, but I appreciate the communication we've had tonight. Thank you for all attending tonight, because we ran on our elections to get the community involved. So that's one comment.
Well, in the spirit of presentation, that's exactly what that was. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. Thank you. Is there any other public comment this evening? I do not believe there's any need for an executive session, so we will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Well, before you do, the question of clarification that I was seeking with Attorney Kerlinkus, back to 5.5, summarize based on how the vote went here.
At this
What the end
point,
result?
you know, at this point, nothing. There's no recommendation to move anything forward essentially to the board. It would go, because it's been
Right.
4 votes, but there's no recommendation from this board to either get rid of parts of the ordinance or.
Well, there is. There's a recommendation that goes to new business because it did not have a positive result, correct?
It will go on to new business, but with no recommendation. Right. So that will go on to it'll go on to, yeah, for 2 more reads. Right. Right.
Thank you.
So is there a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Motion trustee Sima, second trustee Babcock. Quickly call the roll.
Babcock,
Yes.
Wright,
Yes.
Simon,
Yes.
Petty, yes, Clark,
Yes.
Malco.
Yes.
You're adjourned.
Thank you, everyone. And if you didn't get your card from Ann Hanson to sign up as a volunteer or show some interest, please do.
Want to make the comment?